Well, joining us now is Mike Timmis. He is former chairman of the Prison Fellowship International and Prison Fellowship Ministries USA. Mike, thanks so much for being with us today.
It's my pleasure.
I'm very interested to hear about this. Now, you've been involved in prison ministry for more than 30 years, but most of those watching right now probably have never set foot inside a prison. So can you tell us, in general, what happens when you enter a prison to do ministry? Do you talk to the prisoners one-on-one? Do you give them presentations? What happens?
Really, all of the above. If you go to a cell, you always say, you never ask them why they're in. They may tell you, but you would say, my name's Mike, can I talk to you? And they said, what do you want to talk about? And they said, why are you here? I said, well, I really don't want to be here, but my best friend asked me to come here, and he happens to be your best friend too, so he wanted me to tell you that and to tell you how much he loves you and forgives you. And they said, well, who is that? And I say, his name is Jesus. I said, you've heard much about him, but you don't know anything about him. So let me just share a little bit about who loves you, who is your best friend, who is my best friend, and his name is Jesus. And then I would go in with a little exegesis on Jesus. And I've traveled over 120 countries. I've been in prisons on every continent. I've done that through interpreters. I've done that through, a lot of the world speaks English. And I've never had anybody say, I don't want to talk to you. And I include their black Muslims, I include everybody. And it has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with the power of the Holy Spirit and the power of the name Jesus that we don't use enough.
And expanding on that, if you could talk to us a little bit. I understand that you ministered at a prison in El Salvador with some of the gang members, and maybe if you could talk about evangelizing some of those men there.
Well, I walked into a prison, and every single member was prisoner was a member of MS-13. And they had 13 written in cursive on their arms, 13s on their cheeks. A lot of them had shaved heads with 13 on it. And it's a huge auditorium, about 800 guys, and with an aisle down the middle, and they're all sitting like this, staring at the ceiling. And I come in with the officials from El Salvador, and they've set up a dais. They're all in suits. And I normally would wear a sport coat and slacks and a white button-down shirt. And I see these guys, and their eyes never moved towards the front. And I said, Lord, I don't have a clue of what to do here. And all of a sudden, I'm taking my coat off and putting it over my chair, rolling up my sleeves, all in quiet. And then I get off the dais, much to the consternation of the officials I'm with. And I walk down the aisle to the end. It took me about a minute and a half. And then I turned around, and I never said a word, just looked at the men. And I did it again. And I got to the front, and I said, yes, I've heard about you guys. And I said, I've heard that you're really tough guys. But I got to tell you that I've seen tough guys all over the world. But I want to tell you today about the toughest guy I ever met. And I said, this guy was so tough that he laid down his life for me. None of you would have the courage to do that, but he did it for me. I want to tell you about him. You may have heard his name, but you don't know anything about him. So then I went in and talked about Jesus. Now, these guys never moved. And I talked for about 25 minutes about who Jesus is, how much he loves them, how much he forgives them. And so I said, are any of you tough enough to become friends with this tough man named Jesus? And when I finished, about 35 guys jumped up, ran towards me, and started hugging me and crying. And I was so deeply moved that these poor branded men, sheep without a shepherd, and the only thing I knew is that we would do follow-up. There was Prison Fellowship El Salvador, and they would come in and they would do follow-up. But it was a special time where I really saw the Holy Spirit. I had no plans whatsoever of doing any of that. It was just all the Holy Spirit just led me. And it was amazing to me. It still is amazing to me.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me.
Yeah.
What a great story. Now, you don't just walk the walk or talk the talk, you walk the walk, because we read that you and your wife welcomed a former prisoner into your home for a couple years to help him out. What was that like, and how is that man doing today?
Well, he's doing great. There was a law in Michigan that if you had a certain amount of drugs, you got 20 years, no parole. A very stupid law. And because all it hit was the mules, it never hit the organization of drugs. And this man had just met the Lord. He did one more trip carrying marijuana from Texas to Michigan, got caught, got 20 years, no parole. A friend of mine started visiting him, and actually it was a man I was mentoring. And he said to me, I think you should go and start meeting with this prisoner. So I started meeting with this prisoner, and he knew the Lord, and I realized that he should be out on parole. And so I went to the governor, who was a close friend of mine, and I said, look, this is a stupid law. And I wrote a memorandum showing how it would cost over $1 million if somebody stays in jail for 20 years and they're unemployable when they get out, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the last things he did before he was termed out is he got the law changed, and so that there was no more, it was up to the judges to determine, not just automatic. And so he called me and said, you know, Mike, because I'd been trying to get him out in parole. He says, you lost the battle, but you won the war, and he'll be paroled probably in 3 months. So at the end of 3 months, I promised the government that I would take care of him. I would employ, I had a number of businesses at the time, and we lived in a nice neighborhood, and this guy had prison tats all over, and he would, so I had to create a job for him at my house, and he couldn't make a decision. I mean, he couldn't decide if there was two kind of screws to, he couldn't figure out which one would work, type thing. And so my wife was a saint with him, and a lot of women would have been afraid. She was not afraid, and she counseled him. He was not Catholic. I put him into a church with a bunch of guys that I knew who would help him and accept him. And today he is a local pastor up in mid-Michigan.
Oh my gosh.
And he's married with a couple kids, and he started one business that I found that you didn't need a license for was home inspections. And he has a home inspection company and employs a couple people. He is one of the exceptions. He's made it.
Well,
but I'm very proud of that.
It's again, story after story, Mike, and they're all great. And I know you've written The Journey to Ultimate Friendship. Where can people find out more about your work?
Well, I mean, I wrote 2 books, The Journey of an Evangelical Catholic and The Journey to Ultimate Friendship. And in those 2 books, I really cover a lot of what my life has been, and how I have had a unique call to serve Jesus in different places that all of which I never expected to go.
Oh, well, Mike, it's been a pleasure today. Thank you for joining us, and please keep up the good work.
Okay. God bless you.
Thank you.